Good evening, everybody. I'm sports psychologist Dr. Andrew Jacobs. I'm located in Kansas City. By the way, we've got a couple winning sports teams here. I have to throw that out there. How about those Chiefs and the Royals? Both played last night. I was at the Chiefs game. I've been going to Chiefs games since the first game they ever played, and I have never been at Arrowhead Stadium when there were 80,000 people yelling, "Let's go Royals." It was quite an experience last night as a fan and as someone who's worked with athletes on the Chiefs and been the Royals psychologist as well in the past. And this is the Sports Psychology Hour. It's our live stream event. In addition to my radio show, which is every Sunday morning from 7 to 8 a.m. Central Time on 810WHB.com, which I do each week. We talk about mental health issues on there all the time. We've launched the Sports Psychology Hour now as a podcast and live stream. So visit my website, which is winnersunlimited.com, to check out close to 10 years of podcasts on there. We've been doing these live stream Facebook shows now for over a year, and I have close to 10 years of radio shows. I've been on the radio for 33 years here in Kansas City. I'm in my 44th year of work as a sports psychologist, one of the first trained sports psychologists in the country. And we're now doing a new series of conversations focusing on coaches, athletes, and mental health. And tonight we're lucky to have Zack Etter with us. He works at the University of Massachusetts. He's going to explain what he does there. He's a counselor. He's an expert in mental health. So, Zack, thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And, I'm born and raised in New England, and I'm a big Red Sox fan. So I think I speak for probably a lot of America that we're rooting for the Royals here. And, so we're on the same team with that. And honestly, the Chiefs are a team that we could talk about from a mental standpoint as well, coming off back-to-back championships and being undefeated this year. And they're not particularly great at anything, but that championship DNA and the experience that they have, and they really rely on their winning culture to win in the way that they do. So it's always fun to watch how they win their games. They very rarely lose, but I'm sure it's an exciting time to be a sports fan in Kansas City as well.
Yes, it is. Well, the Chiefs have won 11 games in a row now, which is just blows my mind, because I've been going to games since 1963 when I was in third grade when they first started. I went to the very first Super Bowl, and I've been working with players for years. I've been at the 3 Super Bowls that we've won with my oldest son. And the game in Miami, which we beat the 49ers several years ago after a 50-year drought, was one of the coolest things ever. But we're not going to get into that tonight. Well, we could. I can talk about that all night long, but that's not
fair enough. Yeah.
So, but from a mental health perspective, though, you're right. I mean, I've worked with the Olympic team back in the 80s with the Olympic cycling team. I've worked with Olympic athletes in a number of sports who've won medals. I'm one of the first trained sports psychologists. As I said, I was the first sports psychologist at the University of Kansas, first sports psychologist at Kansas City Royals back in 1990. I've seen why and how mental health plays such a big role with athletes, not just at the professional Olympic level, but all the way down to youth sports. I just had a conversation today with one of the most famous athletes ever who played, and his response to me was, "Youth sports is a mess. Doc," he goes, "youth sports is screwed up." He goes, "We're making kids start to play on team." And this is his opinion. I won't say who he is, but he said, we're getting kids starting at 4 and 5 on teams when they should be out just playing with their friends.
Right.
And then that's something we got into. He and I got in a good conversation because, to me, Zack, the whole idea of play for kids has gone out the window. Yep. You don't see kids at a grade school at a park just out there playing. They're always at an organized practice anymore where there's an adult telling them what to do. So my concern about this generation of kids growing up is about creating things, the ability to create. I want to get your thoughts on that. Let's see what you have to say.
I actually have kind of almost a technical response to that and a thought, but just to kind of take a step back and introduce myself to your viewers. So my name's Zack Etter. I'm a licensed mental health therapist in the states of Connecticut and Massachusetts. I'm a certified mental performance consultant through the Association of Applied Sports Psychology. And the two things that I'm doing right now is I run the mental health and performance department for the athletics at the University of Massachusetts. So working on mental health counseling as well as mental skill development, coaches education, and administrative education at UMass. And then I'm the CEO and founder of Holistic Athlete, which is a mental performance consulting company that essentially has 2 divisions to it. One of the divisions is more consulting, where there's products and services about sports psychology and mental health, coaches education courses, workshops, speaking opportunities, and then consulting contracts where I might come in and work with an athletic department for a series of workshops or trainings. And then the other division is more of a private practice where I see athletes and coaches for one-on-one mental health therapy sessions. So that's the work that I'm doing. It's spanned across multiple levels. I've worked in youth sports. We were talking about before we came on air that I wrote a book called My Mental Playbook, which is a system for youth athletes to start incorporating mental skills into their routines. And you're right, it is very commercialized right now. NIL and the development of that at the high school and college level has sort of pushed up the youth sports timeline a little bit, right? Where now youth athletes are starting to think, what private schools am I going to go to? And how can I monetize my athleticism? And, parents are thinking about that as well. But to me, it kind of comes down to the definition of sport versus a game. And this is almost like a trivia question for anybody who wants to know, what is the difference between playing a sport and playing a game? And the answer to that is the definition of sport requires that it has some governing body to it, right? Some principled rules that a governing body oversees it. And a game is something that you could play. You might be able to keep score. There might be a winner and a loser, but it doesn't necessarily have a set of rules that have a governing body to it. And the question that you ask yourself is like, does a 7, 8, 9-year-old need to be operating when they're playing under a governing body? Why can't they just play games? Why can't they just have fun? And I'm working with college athletes right now. A huge question that I ask them in our individual sessions is, did you have fun when you were competing? And then if the answer to that is no, it's very unlikely that they played well. It's very unlikely that they utilized the skills that we've been working on. And it's not, did you have fun because you played well? It's, did you play well because you had fun? And there really is sort of an absence of that love and joy for the game that we used to see.
So what are you seeing from a lot of collegiate athletes now? Because the burnout rate for kids playing sports by the time they're age 12 is 70 to 80%.
Right.
They're quitting. Most of them are quitting because they're tired of it. I know, and I've shared this every show. I started playing sports when I was 5 or 6 with my friends. We didn't have, I'm going to be 70 years old in a couple months. When I grew up, we didn't have organized sports teams for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th grade was when some of the baseball, I remember there was a 3-2 baseball league that was going on here. Some of my friends started to play. That was 6th grade when we were 12 or 13. Now it's at 4 and 5. And the main reason to me is money. It's all about, everything's getting monetized. Everybody's making money off of this. And the problem is, like you said, you're getting NIL going down from the collegiate level down to high school, even the younger ages.
Sure.
I forget the name of the young man whose dad was promoting him earlier this year. He was like 10 or 11 years old. He's a football player. And he was doing all kinds of stuff on him on social media to promote him. At 10 or 11, like, this is ridiculous. I mean, the chances of him even playing a sport in 2 or 3 years is pretty small.
Yeah, I think it's hard to separate the reality of where we are in the sports landscape with social media as well. And the rise of social media has led to the importance and the need for NIL, right? Where a lot of the monetization and the opportunities that athletes have to make money are because of their presence, with social media. I think when we look at youth sports and as we kind of move up the ladder, there's pros and cons, right? Multiple things can be true at once. So for a young person who happens to be playing athletics to learn things like teamwork and sportsmanship and earning a position and the skills that they need to do, like show up on time and give great effort and, work towards being your best self at a young age, that can be valuable. But it's hard to balance that with the stress and anxiety that we're seeing in college and high school athletes right now, where, you ask, what are we seeing in college athletics? Each semester, we do sort of a review of what we would say, the demographics are of people that are seeking help for their mental health. And again, all of my clients are athletes, right? So this is all within the frame of college athletics and high school.
And these are at UMass, they're all D1 athletes, correct?
They're all Division I athletes at UMass, and then holistic athlete, is a variety of different ranges, whether there's some pro sports there's some high school and youth sports there as well. But even just sticking with, the collegiate athlete landscape where we have the demographics, over a third of the amount of student athletes who seek help for individual counseling report anxiety being their primary issue, right?
Why? Let me interrupt you. Why is that? Why do you think that is?
Well, first, I think it's indicative of the general mental health landscape in the general population as well, where we're seeing an increase in anxiety. I think that there's a variety of different reasons for that, just sort of taking a step outside of the athletics landscape. When we want to do mental health counseling with anybody who's struggling with anxiety, one of the main interventions that we do is mindfulness-based practice, where we're trying to be present and we're trying to be grateful and we're trying to pay attention to the things around us and be where our feet are. And we have a piece of plastic in our pocket that holds every single piece of information ever known to mankind. And it's very difficult to be present and to be mindful when our phones and social media and technology is such a significant distraction. I also think if you think, big picture, do you get better when things are easy or hard? Right?
Well,
Needs to be hard, right?
it's got to be hard or you're not going to get anywhere.
Exactly, right? Do we get better when things are, stressful and challenging and engaging and pushing us beyond our comfort level? Absolutely. With the rise in technology and social media and the pandering to, how everybody's doing and this awareness of mental health, we don't like being challenged anymore. We don't like pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone. And more technology means that things are easier. So we've created this society and this environment for us that's quicker, that's simpler, and that's easier. But I think we're experiencing the mental health ramifications of this change in our brain chemistry due to this rise in technology and the distractions and all the things that younger and younger kids are needing to grow up with.
So let me ask this question based on all that.
Mm-hmm.
You're working with collegiate athletes as well as other levels. The role parents play in this whole big picture, to me, is obviously the foundation of everything. Because
Yeah.
I know when my sons, who are now almost 35 and 33, started playing sports, I remember in kindergarten, my oldest son, Jonathan, the day before school started, I got a phone call from a dad who was starting a kindergarten soccer team. And he said he wanted to see if we want to sign your son up. I got the list of names of boys off the school roster and got your phone number. Want to see if he wants to sign up. I said, well, thanks, but he's into wiffle ball and doing stuff like that. He's not into soccer. And this guy's response was, well, sir, I don't know what you do for a living, but you obviously don't know much about sports because he's going to fall behind everybody else. And I said, you're right. You don't know what I do for a living, and my son will not be playing on your team. Goodbye. Well, my son played soccer until he was a junior in high school. Yes, junior in high school. He played it, started about fourth grade, and he had fun with it for 7 or 8 years. And then he said, I'm done. But the pressure now I'm seeing from parents to get started. And a lot of it's about their egos, right, Zach? I mean, their egos get all involved. My son, the Little League game for the 6-year-old game at the T-ball game, he got 2 hits, and boy, he's got a great swing. So you see a lot of parents living through vicariously through their kids, and the pressure that puts on these kids eventually burns a lot of them out, I found.
Well, and then the formation of their identity, right? Where if I want my parents to be proud of me, and if I want things to be okay at home, and I want everybody to be, feeling good about who I am and the direction that we as a family are heading in, I need to perform well. The origins of anxiety is my performance is important. I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't feel like I have control over the situation. Right?
And I'm not pleasing mom and dad.
Sure, right. But that raises the importance, right? Like if you're in the batter's box and you're a baseball player and your relationship with your parents is on the line, of course, that performance becomes incredibly important to you, which raises anxiety. Right. So it's besides the fact that it feels sort of ethically and morally not the correct viewpoint on parenting to begin with, it's also directly challenging the athlete's ability to perform freely and well because of the anxiety that it's producing. So it's counterproductive anyway.
So there's a 3-letter word called fun. Mm-hmm. Remember that word? It's supposed to be fun, right? Mm-hmm. And we've taken that word out of context. And for a lot of kids, the winning and the results become more important than having fun. I have one of the Chiefs that I've worked with Super Bowl jersey in my office. And he gave me one of his Super Bowl jerseys, and on it he wrote the letters FOE, focus on effort, because we always talk about for versus foe. I talk about it all the time on the show. Yeah. Focus on effort, focus on having fun, focus on being your best. Mm-hmm. And he's pretty damn good because that's his whole philosophy is what's in front of him. Yeah. I'm going to do the best I can. If I don't do well, if I make a mistake, I try to look at why that happened and grow from it, because nobody's going to be perfect. And so and it's interesting because I have so many of my clients who have taken that on now. That's their little insignia. They write on their glove or on their hand, FOE, and about having fun, which they're coming in to see me because the fun has been taken out of their game.
Yeah. I guess my thought on that too, though, is just going back to not wanting to be challenged and not wanting things to not go well is when things aren't going well, and it's sports, especially as you move up the ladder, whether it's high school to Division I to pro sports, whatever it is, it's not always going to go your way. There's going to be negative results. There's going to be bad moments. And we need to find a way to see value in that. There's value in failure. There's value in conflict. There's value in not always feeling good. But as a whole, and I'm not saying this is every single person, but as a whole, we as a society try to avoid those negative feelings. We try to avoid those negative moments, and it creates a fear of failure. How could you have fun if you're afraid of failure and judgment and what other people think of you and not living up to expectations and afraid of how your parents are going to respond to negative play? There's no room for fun with all the fear and the anxiety that these athletes are experiencing. And it really comes down to like what you're saying, what you're focusing on. If you focus on outcomes, you're going to feel anxious.
You're bringing what's popping in my head. And as we started off, I'm obviously a big Kansas City person here.
Mm-hmm.
Never met Patrick Mahomes, but I'm intrigued. I'd love to meet him and talk to him someday.
Yeah.
Because what you just said makes a lot of sense. The Kansas City Chiefs have won 11 games in a row. They're 5-0 this year. The last game they lost was on Christmas Day to the Raiders here in Kansas City. And probably Patrick Mahomes' worst game as a pro. He threw an interception. They got at the goal line that scored. Then there was a fumble where the Raiders scored. And the Chiefs lost that game. And Harrison Butker missed a field goal, which he didn't miss another kick until the missed an extra point against Atlanta a few weeks ago. But Mahomes in that game challenged himself. I've got to get better. I've got to be a better player. The team needs to get better, but I've got to get better. They've won 11 games in a row since then. Yeah. And a lot of that was because I think the challenge, when I've listened to him get interviewed, that spurred him on. That bothered him enough because things didn't go right. I've got to look at myself and challenge myself to get better.
Yeah.
And, consequently, they've won all these games, won the Super Bowl along the way and everything else. But I think looking at himself and challenging himself to get better, because we're all going to fail. I don't care who you are. Jack Nicklaus was quoted when he would shoot as close to a perfect score of golf as he could. He'd shoot a score between 63 and 68 with 5 to 8 miss hits. I'd love to have one of his miss hits could be the greatest shot I ever hit. But the fact of the matter is that's 1 out of every 13 shots is going to be a miss hit.
Yeah.
But still, as he said, that's as close to a perfect round as he can score. So the greatest athletes understand that failure is part of what goes on. And rather than freaking out about it and losing control, they turn it as a challenge to get better. And I think, let me get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, and even one better in that moment as well, it's an opportunity to create a competitive advantage against our opponents, right? Creating a competitive advantage means handling like-minded and similar situations that our opponents are going to have to go through, right? So if we're playing a game in the rain, whoever handles the rain better is going to have an advantage. If the officiating's poor, if the crowd is crazy, if the field conditions are bad, whoever handles those things is going to have an advantage. We know for a fact going into a football game that we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to win every rep, and neither are they. So it stands to reason that whatever team handles adversity better, whichever team handles failure and bad plays better, is going to have an advantage. So with that, I say to athletes, when you have an opportunity to make a play, you really have 2 chances to help the team. The first is making the play. That would be great, right? But the second comes immediately after that. If you don't make the play, you could help the team by responding well in that moment, helping us create a competitive advantage against an opponent. And yes, come in, see me. Let's do the individual sessions. Let's give you your skill set. We're going to analyze what happened. And we're going to identify the aspect of your performance the mistake came from. We're going to reset emotionally. We're going to trigger ourselves to move on to the next play. We'll have resources and skill sets in place for that. But every time, if there's any athletes listening, that you have an opportunity to make a play, if you don't make the play, you could help your team right away by responding well, learning from it, moving on to the next play, and creating a competitive advantage against our opponents who are not going to do that well, right? Especially as you go down the line. If you gave me a high school game, any sport, high school game, and you told me that one of the 2 teams was going to manage adversity better, that team's going to win pretty much every time, right? It's just part of sports. It's what we need to do. And you talked about Mahomes' response after that Raiders game. Look at the productive response. Right? When we have negative thoughts, we want to challenge it. Is this thought true? Is this helping me? in what's in my control. He didn't play well. That's the fact of the situation. What can he do about it? Does he need to get better physically? Was it a tactical thing? Does he need to get in the film room? Is there a mechanical adjustment he needs to make? And what does he need to do as a teammate and a leader to bring his teammates up that he hasn't been doing? He searched for answers that were in his control to elevate his game and the teammates around him instead of having it impact his confidence, his emotional regulation, and giving up.
And that's the key thing right there.
Yeah.
He looked at himself and challenged himself to get better rather than looking at himself and beating himself up. Yeah. I'm sure he wasn't happy after that game, but it's like, okay, I've got to get better. I've got to do things better. So rather than being negative and cutting himself down, he challenged himself to improve. And I think that's what I found throughout my career. Back in the 80s, I was the U.S. cycling team psychologist with them from 1982 to 88. I was the Olympic team cyclist in 1984 in the LA Olympics. We won 9 medals, hadn't won any in 72 years. And we went into the Olympics with specifically the track athletes that I work with, the track cyclists. There's an event called the Team Pursuit where 4 guys ride around the track, one behind the other. Every half lap, the guy in the lead goes up and the other 3 pass him. And it's a precision event. It's a challenging event. And we prepared for this for months. And the first ride, there were 16 teams that qualified, and we're about the third or fourth team to go. And of the 12 laps, we went about a third of a lap. One of the guys' rear wheels fell off. We had talked about the what ifs. Instead of getting in a fight like they would have done before working with me, as they said, we regrouped. That guy was eliminated. We had to ride again. We rode 4 or 5 rides later. And then on the last lap, 2 of the 3 guys crashed, bounced down the track. Judges conferred, so you get one more. You get one mechanical, one crash. You qualify or you don't. We rode last, qualified 5th fastest. We're up 40 minutes later against the Danes, the fastest team in the world. We beat them by 1/100th of a second. And then the next day, we won the semifinal. Then we lost in the final. But our goal was to win a medal, break the American record, and stay together as a team, have great attitude, and all the things. The non-materialistic goals are the things that allowed us to do well. They've talked about this many times. One of them and I were on Good Morning America the day of the closing ceremonies talking about it. It was about the mindset of dealing with negativity and failure. And that's, I think, the thing you're emphasizing here. Yeah, that we have to teach. I think and to me, it's about teaching parents for with kids. They're going to make mistakes. It's okay. It's a learning experience. And in the book I co-wrote, Just Let Them Play, Guiding Parents, Coaches, and Athletes Through Youth Sports, our 4th chapter is called Embracing Failure Can Lead to Fun. And I think if kids learn at a young age, not that you have to like failing, but accept the fact it's going to happen, and it's part of the game, and not to freak out, and not, for parents on the ride home to not ridicule their son for dropping the pass or missing the shot, or their daughter for screwing up, but instead of saying, hey, that was great watching you play, I love watching you play, let's go home and get something to eat. Right. Instead of focusing on the negativity, because that goes back to what we started here with the burnout and the quitting and the stopping, goes back to the parents and their role. So as we wrap up, what do you see today parents' roles in youth sports should be from a positive perspective?
Yeah, what I'd really like parents to focus on is the development and the identification of values and behaviors that are going to be great for their kids to learn through sport, right? So for example, winning is a great goal. Getting a scholarship, monetizing your performance, being successful. But the problem with those goals are that they're obvious, right? Everybody wants those things. You put 100 kids in a classroom, ask, would you rather get an A or an F on the test? They're all going to say an A, right? Every single high school team in the country wants to win a state championship. Every D1 athlete wants to play pro. So I'm not saying those goals are useless, but the only thing they really serve for is to guide us in the direction of the values that we need to care about and the behaviors that we need to commit to. So when your kid is playing youth sports, how would you like them to respond to adversity? What type of passion and commitment do you want them to work towards with things that they care about? How do you want them to treat their teammates? What process do you have in place for them to get better? What's their view on failure? This is life stuff. And I know that this is a common saying that sport is a microcosm of life. It is and it isn't, right? The part where it's not is that life doesn't really have a scoreboard. You don't get to check in to see if you're winning or how you're doing against your opponents. There's not a lot of measuring sticks in life. Life is pretty gray. And the great thing that youth sports and high school sports and even college sports provides us, are these barometers. How am I doing? How am I doing against opponents? How am I doing against teammates? Like, where am I in terms of my progress? So we all want to win. We all want to be successful. We all want the same things. The people who are successful and do win aren't necessarily the ones who want it more. They're the ones who have a comprehensive plan that identifies the values that they need to care about and believe in, and the subsequent behaviors that they need to commit to, with a real understanding of the fears and being tired and being frustrated, all the barriers that are going to get in the way, and plans for those. And if we have plans for behaviors that we want to commit to, an identification of barriers that are going to get in our way, and a plan for what we're going to do about those barriers, now you're creating holistic, resilient, talented, successful kids from the ground up that can operate in adversity, that can operate when things aren't going their way, that have a higher tolerance for failure and things that they might not enjoy, because life isn't always simple. Life isn't always easy. And sports provides a great opportunity to teach those skills. But the anxiety and the fear of failure that parents in some of these systems are creating get in the way of the development of the human being, which is what we really care about at the end of the day.
Well, Zach, let me say this. I totally respect what you're saying, and I agree with it. It's great to hear. I do this show to meet people who are working in the field, obviously younger than I am, who have the passion that I've had throughout my 44 years of work. And I can see that with you. It's, when I started working, my first job was at the University of Kansas in December 1981 for $5 a day with the track teams, men's and women's track teams. And we ended up, the men's team won the Big 8 indoor and outdoor championship that year. And they gave me a 100% raise to $10 a day plus lunch the next year.
There you go.
But when I started, people didn't want to deal with this stuff. Mm-hmm. And the track coaches, Bob Timmons and Carly Coffey, who are the coaches there, took a chance on me. And I've now sports psychology, mental health in sports it's everywhere. We hear about it all over, from the Olympics to professionals to collegiate, where you're at everywhere. And it's great to see someone like you getting involved in this, because your message is very clear and succinct. It's about helping people out and getting better. So I really appreciate you joining us tonight. I can see you're going to have a great career ahead of you with this.
Thank you.
And because you're saying the right things.
Yeah.
And you'll find people who'll be naysayers along the way. I'm sure you've encountered them. You're going to find people who are going to challenge you with all this stuff because they think you don't know what you're talking about, because they know better. A lot of those are coaches, by the way, as I'm sure you know. But we need more people like you doing this. So how can people get a hold of you? Because you've got a good message here. You also have a book people can get. So how can people reach you?
Thank you. Yeah. And my last thing that I'll say before the contact information is, to the naysayers and to maybe the parents and coaches that don't believe in investing in sports psychology and mental health for their athletes. If you're a coach, to me, your two main jobs are to develop your athletes into better people and players, and to win. And investing in mental skills and mental performance, as well as the mental health of your athletes, helps you do both of those things. It helps you develop your athlete into better performers and helps them off the field, and it'll help you win games as well. So this is where we're at. It's something that's needed. The mental health landscape calls for it. The things that your athletes are struggling requires it. Please invest time and energy into your players' mental health and performance. I have my company, Holistic Athlete, which you can go to holisticathlete.org. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Zack, Z-A-C-K, Etter, E-T-T-E-R-H-A. And then my email, feel free to shoot me an email, ask me any questions. You want to jump on a Zoom call, just let me know. It's zetter, E-T-T-E-R, at umass.edu. Feel free to reach out with any questions. If you want to meet, let's talk and let's get into it.
Well, this has been a tremendous enjoyment having you on tonight. I really enjoy what you're saying. I can tell you've got a great future ahead of you with this. So I want to thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me on.
You're more than welcome. And if you've enjoyed our conversation, go check out my website, winnersunlimited.com. There's a click on the podcast tab. You'll hear all kinds of podcasts for years of doing this. Find out more information about me. That's winnersunlimited.com. You can always reach me at my office, which is 816-561-5556, or my email is drj@winnersunlimited.com.